these birds really are. And I said, yeah, it would be great, but like all things, it's like, yeah, I mean, show me the money, right? It's like, see, is this really going to happen? And sure enough, after I came out here to work for Audubon, he called me up and said, hey, I got some money. Come on down. Let's go to Guatemala and figure out what's going on. So that's how I kind of got started on this project. Little background on the Maya and Mayan. So Maya refers to the people, Mayan refers to the languages. Technically, people mix this up all the time and I may get confused as well, but that's how we're supposed to do it. And the Mayan languages are thought to have originated in Guatemala, and you can see here how at different times, different groups wandered off, and as they wandered off across Mesoamerica, their languages became divergent. Mayan is not one language. It's a language family, so it's like Romance languages in Europe. Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, French. Those are all Romance languages based out of Latin, and all the Mayan languages similarly have a common core, but they've split off from each other. And if you take a look at a timeline, this is the year 0, this is BC, AD, you can see how that Proto-Mayan split off into over 30 different languages, right? And this gives you the time depth of these splits and the different groups. So Chorti, here's where we started. We've since worked with 9 different Mayan languages, and in May we're scheduled to go, I'm really excited to go work with the Teaneck Maya or the Huastec. Those are the ones that went all the way up the Gulf Coast. You might have seen in that previous slide. They're the ones that split off from the Proto-Mayan so much earlier than the rest. So I'm very excited to go down in May and work with those folks down there. If you look at where they are distributed across this area, here's Guatemala, Belize, the Yucatan Peninsula, Chiapas in Mexico, the Huastec were way up here. And so they went pretty far, so it's going to be fun to go to that whole different area. Again, the ones that are circled are the ones that we have worked with so far. We hope to work with even more, and eventually there will be a book on the birds among the ancient and modern Maya based on the stuff that we've found. So this is Kerry Hull, my friend that I met in Texas. He's teaching now at BYU. Here we are in different assorted places, talking with folks. Where he was originally doing his research and compiling his dictionary was this town of Hocotan. So it's on the border with Honduras. So Copan, famous ruins are across the border right here, so it's fairly close to there. And this is an endangered language. There's about 41,000 people that live in Hocotan and the surrounding area. So there's maybe a few tens of thousands of people that speak this language. So it's an endangered language. And he was compiling this dictionary. To get there, you have to fly into Guatemala City and take a bus. And so that's what we did. I met him in the airport. We flew our separate ways. We got down there, and then we got on a bus. And right around here where the main highway splits, my friend Kerry leans over and said, right here, this is where last year a guy on a motorcycle drove up and shot the bus driver dead. And he was sitting in the seat right behind the bus driver. And he said, that store over there, that's where I ran after the bus driver died, and I hid in there for 3 hours until it all cleared up. And he's like, I still haven't told my wife this because she probably won't let me come back down here. I'm like, why are you telling me this? So usually when you're in the Mayan communities, it is safe, but Guatemala has become dangerous, and we'll talk a little bit about that again. So here we are in Hocotan, right? This is on the edge of town. This is from the balcony of the little hostel place where we were staying, looking up this road. This is the road where we're going to hike all the way up a few miles up into the hills. And the people live in what's called aldeas. They are not villages. They're smaller. They're just little hamlets of a couple different houses. And they're scattered all the way up into the valleys. This is one of our main informants. And we're going to go hang out with them. But we went there in 2006 for the first time. And at that point, nobody had cell phones. Everybody has cell phones now. But then there was no way to really let people know that we are coming. And we just showed up. We just walked up from town and showed up. And when we showed up, everybody seemed very excited to see us, like overly excited. And they were kind of like, "Whew, we're so glad you're here." And we're like, what do you mean? And he said, in the middle of the night, we were all woken up by a bird that was calling. And it was freaking us out. The bird was the waka, also known as the laughing falcon. And it has this call, walk, 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 walk. And it had woken everyone up in the middle of the night. And they know it's an omen, but they didn't know exactly what the bird was trying to tell them. But then when we showed up, they're like, oh, thank goodness, it was just saying you were going to come. They were afraid someone was going to die or something. But it had, for them, it had announced that we were coming. And as if to underscore that, while we were sitting there talking with him, 2 of these came flying down past us, down through the Aldea, just again. And he said, wow, we never see 2 of them together. So this was they had announced our presence, they had blessed us, and they were more than happy to work with us. So this is the laughing falcon that had announced our presence. Now, all right, we're just going to move ahead. All right, so hopefully we'll figure out how this is working. All right. Whew. Thanks for your patience, guys. This is usually I have to have patience for my field work because things never go the way you want them to when you're actually down there. I'm going to have a little patience tonight with the technology. I apologize. So that bird had called us, and we had a great time down there working with the local people, learning about the different stories they had with the birds and figuring out what those names all meant. And for instance, we had stories like how the turkey vulture got its red head. You want to hear that one?
Yeah.
All right, so this one, there's no children present, so that's probably good. Once upon a time, turkey vulture was up in a tree looking down at a cow, right? He's hungry. He's trying to decide, is the cow dead or just sleeping? Dead or sleeping. If it's dead, then that's a meal. If it's sleeping, no, he can't go there, right? So he's sitting there, and while he's sitting there, a red-tailed hawk flies in, and the hawk's like, so what are you doing? He's like, I'm trying to decide if that's dead so I can go eat it or not. Well, the red-tailed hawk convinces him, yeah, that's dead for sure. Go ahead, just fly on down there. So eventually, turkey vulture's like, yes, okay. Flies down. And I don't know if you've noticed on the side of the road how turkey vultures get into a carcass. They don't really have a great can opener type of a beak to rip into things. They have to go through the easiest access points, which are often through the eyes or the rear end. Well, this time he flies down to the rear end, right? So he's really excited, sticks his head in the rear end of the cow. Cow is not dead. Cow clenches. He's barely able to get his head out, pulls off all of his feathers, and that's how the turkey vulture got it. So, I mean, what's not to like about hanging around with guys telling you stories like this? It was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed it, just hanging out. So we had so much fun that my buddy's like, well, let's keep doing this. We'll just go to other Mayan language areas and find out what stories they have and the names that they have for birds. So that's what we've been doing. These are some Chol Maya speakers in Chiapas. We just drove up to them. We were actually looking for Chontal Mayan speakers, and we're told to go to this village. We went to this village, and they weren't Chontal speakers, they were Chol speakers, but we're like, okay, what the heck? Hey, you got a few minutes? You mind answering some questions about birds? We hop out with our field guides. I've got my iPod there, and I'm playing bird sounds, because they really know the sounds better than they know the pictures. And they tell us all these stories. You can see some coconuts that they pulled off of the tree for us while we were, the people have been very, very friendly. Here's some other Chol speakers higher up in Chiapas. And I'm sorry the music is not working on this, because this old guy in the Chontal area, he revitalized the tradition of Chontal flute music because it was almost dead. As you can tell, he was almost dead. He had a catheter and was barely alive when we found him, but he was revitalizing this ancient music that they had, all based on bird sounds and the songs of birds. And so they have these flutes. He sold us a CD and gave us some hot chocolate. Wasn't hot, it was chocolatey, traditional Mexican chocolate drink, which has a lot of cinnamon and things in it. It's very different from your American stuff. And it was great. This is the kind of people that you just run into. This is down on the Gulf Coast of Tabasco State. And this is the kind of fun we get to have, eating interesting things. This is actually an alligator gar empanada. Anybody know what an alligator gar is? What can you tell us about an alligator gar?
Big ugly fish.
Big ugly fish, right? It's like a big long pencil, very skinny, but it has like an alligator face with big old teeth, right? So they're like this long, and they fish them out of all the rivers there, and then they rotisserie them on a stick, and then they peel the meat off, and then they make these kind of empanadas with it. And every time I go to the Chontal area, there's one place where I got, as soon as I get off the bus from the big town into the little town, go across the plaza, get one of these. It's probably makes you sick because you shouldn't eat the lettuce down there, but it's so good. I try not to eat the lettuce too much, but the fish itself is good. These are some old guys. Notice the trademark violations on the walls. When we go to an area, we're looking for people that actually speak the different Mayan languages, and the young people often don't. So we're often looking for older people. This Chontal Mayan language has less than 20,000 speakers, and not very many of them have a large vocabulary. So we're looking for old people that used to work in the land and have more of a familiarity with the names for the birds, and it's hard to find. And even when you get information, it can be very difficult. So for instance, in that Chontal area, they kept telling us about crows, about these crows, and these crows were amazing because they're magical. If you find a crow nest, you can take a rock and you go and you take the egg and you replace it with a rock. And that egg is magic. Then after the crow has sat on that rock, it becomes magic. So you can get that rock and then you have like this magic rock. You can do magical stuff with it, right? So it's a very cool bird. And there's only one problem. There are no crows that far south in Mexico. So we're like, what is this? They keep calling it a cuervo. So we're like, well, can you describe these crows? And they're like, well, they're black and they fly around in groups and they're along the shore and they eat fish and they sometimes they're swimming and we're like, what is this bird? But it took us weeks to figure out what this bird was because again we get the Chontal name and the Spanish name, but it didn't really fit until finally we were able to talk to an old guy who had another name, and based on ancient sources that we had, we were able to finally figure out what the Chontal crow was. Any guesses? The Chontal crow, Margaret?
A raven?
Is a neotropic cormorant, which we should have been able to figure out if we actually understood the etymology of the word cormorant. Do you guys know where the word cormorant comes from and what it means? It comes from the old French. And the cor in cormorant is the same cor in corvus, crow. And the mar in cormorant is sea. They're sea crows. And in old French, cormorant was sea crow. And it brought into English, and we forgot what would have helped us out if we would have known this. But we finally figured it out. But it's like a mystery. Every time we're trying to figure out what these things are that people are telling us about. And it turns out the cormorant's actually very important. This is from Palenque. This is a headdress that would have been for a ruler. And we've had this big cormorant eating a fish on it. It was a bird that was sacred in this part of the Maya world. And one thing to remember about the Maya is it wasn't like the United States of America, a big empire with everybody together, right? Even in the classic Maya times when they made the biggest pyramids and all of this, each city was independent. unless it got conquered by a neighbor. And they would conquer each other back and forth, but there was no just giant all one unity. And so you have separate cultures and even separate Mayan languages developing in the Maya area. And so you can't say that if it's true in one area, it's true for another. It's very, very disjointed. How many of you have been to Palenque? Anyone been to Palenque? It's a very famous Mayan ruin. It's got this, they call this the observatory, this tower. It's a fantastic place near Villahermosa. So it's pretty easy to get to, but you got to fly into a secondary airport and then take a 2-hour bus ride. And so it's the kind of thing you usually would do with a tour package to try to go there, but it's where they have found some of the best ancient Mayan writing. So it's been very, very important to help understand the ancient Maya. And the cormorant was one of the birds that was important there. If you go there, you run into these guys. This is another group of Maya called the Lacandon Maya. Their ancestors kind of fled from the Spanish that had invaded the Yucatan Peninsula, and they had hid kind of in the jungle for hundreds of years. And they wore these traditional tunics that they originally made out of the bark of trees. Now they're cotton and other things. But if you go to Palenque, they're like selling bows and arrows and stuff. Is really kind of touristy. And they live about 2 hours from there in a truck. And so if you go to Palenque, you can hire someone in a pickup truck for $200 to take you 2 hours out into the jungle. And they have some little villages there. And there's only a few thousand speakers of the Lacandon Maya, so it's very endangered. So we went out to this area, and here's one of them kind of paddling us across the lake. Here we are talking in the woods, hanging out. They actually have a guest house that you can stay in. So once again, we didn't know anyone, so we just showed up. We had to talk to the chief of the village, who was also in charge of the national park around the area, and get his permission to work in the community. So we stayed in the guest house, and then his wife would make the food for us, and we would hang out during the day with them, and they would show us stuff like where they were growing their corn, tell us all their stories about birds, hang out with their kids. So having a good time. This is a fish that doesn't look like much to eat, but it was super, super tasty coming out of the lake near there. This summer, that lake dried up. It's a beautiful lake, but with climate change, they're having changing weather patterns, and the lake dried up. I'm assuming it's filling up again now, but over the summer it actually dried up, which was pretty alarming. And we're looking for birds. And we're usually in the jungle, and it's hard to get pictures of birds. So this was, wouldn't you know it, the day I left my camera back in the guest house, because I thought, well, I'm not having any luck getting good pictures. This guy showed up. So I took this picture with my phone through my binoculars. A little bit better. Can you see what it actually is? No. So I'm going to give you somebody else's photo. It's this guy, an ornate hawk eagle. So there's some very spectacular birds that we get to look at. And I don't think it's going to play the sound. So sorry about that, guys. It's going to freeze up again if I try. But we hang out with these people, and they tell us their stories. This guy's named Francisco. He's in Belize. So this was on another one of our trips down there. We actually focused on 2 Mayan languages in Belize. And what was great about him is he was Kekchi Maya, but his wife was a Mopan Maya, and he had heard a lot of stories from his grandfather, who taught him how to hunt. And so he had some old stories that are hard to come by now, which were great. And what was fantastic was, after we were done, he was like thanking us. He's like, thank you for coming and asking these questions, because you're helping me remember stuff that I haven't thought of in 20 years. I probably would never think of them again, except you were asking these questions. And it was really fascinating. So he's telling us about, for instance, how the king vulture, when it dives like a 747, that means that the dry season is coming. And the laughing falcon, our friend that kind of told the Chorti Maya that we were coming, he is what they call a padrino. He's kind of like the godfather of the rain. and he actually says the word rain. And if he flies up onto a green branch and goes, waka, 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 he's basically saying water, 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 water. He's like calling for the beginning of the rainy season. But then if he flies up and later onto a dry branch and does that, he's calling for the rainy season to end. So the question is he announcing this? And so it's kind of like an omen? Or is he actually the one that's making it happen? Like magic, by calling for the rain. So depending on which group you ask, you might get a different answer. Oh, the other thing that was fun about this, do you guys know what a laughing falcon eats? They eat snakes. So in one of the little villages where we were staying, we would have dinner in a different home every night, and I would be playing my iPod full of sounds, and I'd be imitating some of them myself, and the kids would be all around, and the women would be coming in and out of the back room where they're cooking, and so I'm talking about the waka, and I'm like, wak, 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 wak. I mean, impersonating myself, and they all start laughing. They're like, you can't do that, you can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean? If you impersonate the waka, you will have bad breath. Well, since they eat snakes, probably, the idea would be you wouldn't want snake breath. But it's announcing the rainy season. Here's another bird that announces the rainy season, the clay-colored thrush. Have any of you been to South Texas to see these guys? It's about, in North America, that's about as far north as they come. So if you're trying to get all the birds for north of Mexico, you got to go to South Texas to see these, but they're very common throughout Central America. And they sing in a beautiful song, and they indicate when it's going to rain. Also, different times of day, they have different songs. And then here was one that was fun as we were walking around in Belize. They said, yeah, this bird is a clock, the yellow-billed cacique, or in Mopan, the oots oots. Now the oots oots, it kind of just has a single note that it repeats, and it is said to call on the hour. So it's like a clock. On the hour it will call. And what was weird is we would hear it, and then, yes, sure enough, it wouldn't call again until about an hour later. So these people are kind of plugged into the sounds around them, and they're recognizing all of when these things happen. Here was another one, the kushkushkapi, which is the black hawk eagle. Now, it is said that this guy calls, and when he calls, it basically means that his boss, who is Satan, is going out for lunch. And that's usually about 10:30 in the morning. Which, if you've birded in the tropics, you'll know that a lot of these big raptors, they don't really get going in the morning until things heat up and there's enough air circulation and lift that they can kind of float around. So usually about 10:30 in the morning is when he would start calling and getting active. And so, I don't know about the Satan part, but basically, it was true. These guys have a temporality of when they're going to call. The little tinamou, or the shulul, shoo, shoo, shoo. They make these really haunting calls, which is really cool, which I thought I heard from my house in New Jersey one time. That's when I knew I was losing my mind, because I'm like, yeah, it's not there. I don't know what the sound was I was hearing, but the shulul, it starts calling about 4:30 in the afternoon, and that tells them when they're working on the farm that it's time for them to pack up and head back home for dinner. So it's kind of like an alarm clock as well, telling them that the day is over. And so that makes sense that they would call at different times and they'd be noticing it. But then there were things that are harder for us to maybe understand. Like the idea that if the tsunun would fly into your house, it meant that a visitor was on its way, or among the Kekchi, it meant that someone was coming to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage, right? So these seem kind of like folklore to us, but all the time when they would tell us things like this, they would say, no, it's true, we've seen this happen. So this is part of their experience. Here you have woodpeckers that are basically telling different Mayan groups good things are going to happen, or maybe a salesman is coming for the Mopan Maya, the Tsutuhil. Something good will happen if it's on your right side that you hear it, but if it's on the left side, it means something bad is going to happen. So these birds, again, they're announcing the future, or they're making the future actually happen. And so sometimes they tell us that these things are bad. So it's very curious. It's a different worldview that they live in. For us, birds are like feathered animals that we like to see, and they're, we like them. But for them, they're members of the community. They say their name. So usually the names are based on what they sound like to them. And then, like in the case of that laughing falcon, they're saying water, and it's magic that they're making this happen, right? That guy Francisco that was sitting on that hammock that I was telling you about, he had these great stories about hunting with his grandpa. And they're hunting these peccaries or these little alpacas, and the birds help them. The birds, if they hear this bird, the crested guan, which even has, so if you go back, it's gonna let me go back? Not gonna let me go back, but it has the name of the wild pig in its name. So this is like wild pig bird. If you hear the wild pig bird, you know that's a good place to hunt, right? Because the wild pig is going to share the habitat. That makes sense for us, right? As biology type people, it's a similar habitat. So they're tying into this. Again, chacao means wild pig, and in the Quechua, Eurufus piha is the wild pig bird as well. So similar habitat, lets you know you're in a good hunting area. But here's the deal. Sometimes birds help you, and sometimes they don't help you. So they are kind of ambiguous about this bird, the pop, which actually says the same hop, 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 hop. Brown jay. Brown jay, if the wild pigs are running around, it's going to disturb the brown jay. The brown jay is going to get all worked up and let you know that the pigs are around. But if he gets fixated on you, he's going to get freaked out, and then he's going to tell the wild pigs that you're around. So sometimes it works both ways. So with the brown jay, the pop, you have to be careful. Now, they hunt at night, and you can't just go running around willy-nilly with a headlamp on at night to find these things to shoot, because you'll just scare them away. So we're like, how do you do this at night? He goes, well, it's very simple. What you do is you just sit still, you turn off your lamp. And then as soon as you hear the boo, you flick on your light, because he's telling you that the wild pig is right in front of you, you flick it on, and then you shoot. So for them, these owls tell them when to shoot, so they're helping them, which is different from other things that they do, we'll get to in a little bit, but very interesting. As most of the time we're dealing with farmers, and so we're getting lore about the farm, but because not very many of the different Mayan communities actually hunt anymore. But when you get ones that hunt, you get some of these very, very specific omens or messages that they give them. But some of them are bad. So this is a cute guy, right? A little pygmy owl. How many of you have seen a pygmy owl? Right? We have pygmy owls out west, or if you go down south, this is the fruginous pygmy owl, makes it all the way up to South Texas again. But they call him the kosh kosh, and he is a bad omen. In fact, we were hiking one day and we saw one of these guys, and what happened was our native informant got very nervous, and he's like, we should not be sitting here looking at him. It's something bad's going to happen. And we're like, okay, so for his sake, we just kind of moved on down the trail. And then a few minutes after we left, this guy started calling. Now, his name in Chorti was Kosh Kosh, because that's what they say. Kosh, 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 Kosh. So we start hearing this Kosh, 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 Kosh. And now our friend is getting very upset. He's like, I told you. And just then, one of the other guys, there were three of us plus our native informant, our other friend, falls off the trail, scrapes up his leg really bad, and we had to go back to the village as soon as he started calling. So again, our guide was like, I told you, you probably made him mad, and then he made this happen. So Again, was he predicting that something bad was going to happen, or did he actually make it happen himself? It's hard to tell. Other night birds also give bad signs. So the paraki. Now, we love this. Again, if you're a birder in North America, you go down to South Texas to see these guys, and they parir, parir. They have this call. That's why all of their names in the different Mayan languages are similar, based on what they say. Well, yeah, but these are bad. They fly around at night, they land in the road, and you don't know what they're doing, and it might be a sorcerer who has sent the bird. Or among the Lacandon, if you eat this bird, it'll make you go crazy, so you can't eat it. It's ambiguously bad. And so, again, we like them because they're hard to see, they only come out at night. So as a birder, it's great, but for them, it's not a good thing that they want to see. The squirrel cuckoo. Now, as a birder, wouldn't you love to see this? It's beautiful, and it's hard to see. They hide in the bushes. But if you are a Mayan, you may not like them at all. Our friend, the dad of that kid that was curling his tongue, said that one day he was going out to his cornfield, and he heard one of these guys. And usually when you hear one of these guys, it's telling you that there is a venomous snake. So you need to be careful. But he was in a hurry, and he's like, yeah. So he just blew it off, and then he got bit 3 times by a fer-de-lance, which is the worst kind of pit viper that's down there, and he almost lost his leg, and he almost died. And so he said, I learned my lesson. I should not have ignored that king. So the king is something you don't want to mess with. Now, not every Maya group has these same stories, but you get similar ones sometimes, and you gotta be careful. So remember how I said woodpeckers can be bad? That first place we went to with the Chortee, this was my favorite thing. They said, El Wek-Wek es un brujo. The Wek-Wek is a sorcerer, right? He makes bad things happen. He comes, he eats your corn, which is bad, but he also makes other bad things happen. So we had friends that had a pet parrot, and the Wek-Wek showed up and starts calling, and then next thing you know, a hawk flew in and grabbed the parrot and flew off with it. So they were convinced that the woodpecker was basically, sold out the parrot, and the hawk got it. Something bad happened, but the Wek-Wek es un brujo, that was one of my favorite things. Now they have 2 names in Chortee, Wek-Wek and Chaku, because they have 2 different sounds that they make. All right. This is the golden-fronted woodpecker. How many of you know this bird from South Texas? Again, they come out to South Texas. They're very closely related to what bird do we have here? Can you tell? Red-bellied, right? It's very similar to the red-bellied woodpecker. So just imagine, it's basically kind of the southern version of a red-bellied woodpecker, basically. Next time you see a red-bellied woodpecker, think, is it a bird? Or might it be a sorcerer? I don't know. There are other birds that are agricultural pests. So the barred parakeet in the Tutu area, they call that the kel. Now, everybody, do you guys know what this is, that little apostrophe in languages? Have you seen that? Maybe in Hawaiian? Do you guys know what that is? That's a glottal stop. That's the sound that we make in English when we say uh-oh, that little in the back of your throat between the O's, uh-oh. It's actually a consonant in some languages. For us, we don't have it, right? That's why we can say Hawaii, but Hawaii isn't the place, right? It's Hawaii, and it has that little between the 2 I's, right? So Kel is the name. It's not Kel, it's Kel. I'm not very good at it, but a little linguistic thing in honor of my linguist partner. I'm the bird guy, he's the linguist. That's how we make this work. So agricultural pests. One day in the Mopan village, where they told me not to impersonate the Wako, we were sitting around because it had been raining, and so they just wanted to hang out, and so we're asking questions or telling stories, and then they start laughing, and we're like, what's going on? And they didn't want to tell us, and then finally we were like, no, tell us what's going on. And they said, well, here's the deal. When you plant your corn, you have to abstain from sex for a week before you plant your corn. Otherwise, the group-billed ani will come and eat the corn and you won't get a good harvest. And these two guys are like, no, that's not true. That's just an old saying. But this guy's like, no, it's true. I've proven it. You guys just don't want to abstain, so you want to say that it doesn't work. But so again, these are things that don't make sense to us, but in their world, they've proven it. They've tried it both ways, and it's worked for them. So they know that this is somehow a connection. The great-tailed grackle, the ka in Chontal, these can help with healing. You can take their nest and you can burn it kind of like incense, and it'll help your baby if your baby has colic. Anybody have any kids that had colic once upon a time, and grandkids? Go get a grackle nest, burn it in your house. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us necessarily, but again, it's a world where everything is connected, and things things happen based on very observable things. So for instance, how many of you know this bird, the mastityra? Seen pictures of it? All right. Sorry the sound isn't working, but they get together in a group and they kind of dance in a tree, right? And they make this noise, this big racket that they make. And the idea is, if you have warts on your feet, I'm not going to ask by show of hands who's got a wart, but if you do, you might want to book a flight down there, because what happens is if you go to where these guys are dancing in the tree, in a lek, trying to attract a mate, and you get underneath there and you dance with these guys, it'll take away your warts. It'll take them away. Can you guess why they might think that this bird might take its warts? It's got these like warty things all around its eye. It's kind of hard to tell with the light on, but it's got kind of warts there. So again, this is what they call sympathetic magic in anthropology. It's the idea that things that have similar appearances have similar relationships. So you can make the connection here between your warts and his warts, and then we'll take your warts, which is very, very cool. It's so cool that that idea has moved into areas where they don't even have the tatiras. So up in the Tutu Hill area, they don't have the mastityra. What they have these wrens that make a similar noise and cackle together in the bushes. They're not in the trees, they're in the bushes, but they sound like the other bird. And so they have this similar story. If you have warts, you can go and dance with these wrens and they'll take it away, right? Because people get warts whether you've got a tatiara around or not. And so similar sound, you can see how this idea kind of travels. Another way to cure colic in babies with a hummingbird. The Tseltal, one old gentleman told us that there's a secret heart disease remedy he wouldn't tell us how to do it because it's a secret, but he's like, there's a way to cure heart disease with the hummingbird. So interesting connection between hearts and hummingbirds, because in the Tutu Hill Maya area in highland Guatemala near Lake Atitlan, which is where there used to be a grebe that's now extinct, the Atitlan grebe. It's a beautiful area. The town is called the House of Birds in their language because the women, they weave these tops and they're just loaded with birds. And then the men wear pantalones, little kind of long shorts that are woven that have all of these birds in it. So birds are just a big part of their culture. It's a marketing town. These are more urban Maya. Not as many of them have their farms as they used to. And so this was interesting because a lot of these people didn't know as many birds as the farmers or the hunters did because they live in an urban environment. So just like us, they're kind of becoming more separated from their environment, which was odd. But they did tell us about how you can make a love potion out of hummingbirds. Does anybody need a love potion recipe? You want to know, or shall we just move on?
Tell.
What's that?
Tell.
All right, so it's a little gruesome, and it would violate the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So I'm not telling you to do this. But if you want someone to fall in love with you, what you do is you got to catch 2 hummingbirds. So it's not easy. You catch the 2 hummingbirds, and then you rotisserie them on a fire until they're just carbonized. Poor little guys, right? This is the problem. Don't do this at home. Then you put those little carbonized poor little guys in a handkerchief and you put it in your pocket. Right? So then you're walking around and you see the object of your affections, right? So you reach your hand in there and you get a little of that hummingbird dust on your fingers. And then you go up to them when you're talking to them and you just rub that on their elbow while they're not really paying attention. And they'll fall in love with you for sure. There you go. Hummingbird love potion. So thinking back to why would hummingbirds be connected to love? Because this is where we start getting back to the ancient Maya. This goes back pretty far. This idea here is a classic Maya pot. Here you have this guy dressed up as the god Ekshua. He's dancing and he impregnates the princess with his nose. Very strange. Again, there's no children in the room, so what would that, I'll leave to your imagination what it is about how hummingbirds feed that might make somebody think about sex, but because of their connection in their minds, that's how you get hummingbirds connected to love and to hearts, heart disease. It's all connected, right? Based on how hummingbirds feed. We don't have to spend that much on it again. But birds, in the modern Maya, as I've been indicating, are messengers, right? And you see this in the ancient Mayan iconography, the artwork, and the language. So here is a bird that's a messenger, bringing a message. And the hummingbird often is a messenger. So in the ancient hieroglyphs, so here's Sunun, so remember Sunun, and all of them Mayan languages, there's only one word for hummingbird. There's different species, but they're all Sunun, some sort of Sunun. And that goes back pretty far, and it's probably not even a Mayan word. It probably actually comes from an Uto-Aztecan language. So it's a strange word, but it goes back to the classic Maya time. So this is 600 AD. And here the hummingbird is talking to Itzamna. Itzamna is the creator grandfather god, kind of the Zeus, head of the pantheon of the ancient Maya. Right, so he's going to show up again, but here he is talking to a hummingbird who is bringing a message. Notice the flower on the beak of the hummingbird. So again, birds are messengers, and the word for bird is mut. It's the same word as messenger. So here you have some messengers that are coming to bring a message to the king. There's no bird to be seen, but it's talking about the mut, the messenger bird. So mut is the word for bird, especially in its role as a messenger between gods and people, or in the case of our modern friends, just out there in the woods. When the Spanish came in, we know they burned all the books, right? We've got like 5 books that survived. Most of them are gone. However, I still have some hope, because a couple times we've had informants say, "Do you think we really let them burn all our books?" And I'm like, "What? Are you telling me there's..." So they get real tight-lipped after that, but it's like there may be books out there. You can cross your fingers and hope. But what happened is many of the different groups wrote down the stories that they had, and so the Annals of the Cachiquels, this is one of the languages, they wrote down kind of their origin stories, and they've been translated into Spanish. And as you see that birds are messengers there that guide them on their journeys, right? The owl is a messenger. The parakeets, at one point they're like, the birds are telling them that they're going to have a disastrous journey, and they're like, you don't really have the authority to tell us this. You're just like an agricultural messenger, right? So you can't tell us we're going to have a bad journey. So it's very complex, the stories and the connections that these groups have for the different birds. The Popol Vuh, how many of you have heard of the Popol Vuh? Sometimes it's referred to as the Mayan Bible, but it's like the Annals of the Kaqchikel, but for a closely related different group, the Quiche Maya. And it talks about the creation of the world by the different gods, and then they have these twins that are the heroes of the Maya, and the stories about these hero twins, which we'll see in a little bit. But one thing that's great is those hero twins were playing around one time, and they didn't want to get caught unawares. Like their grandma, who was basically Itzamna's wife, right? The grandmother goddess was like gonna check up on them probably, so they wanted the dove to like be a sentry for them. So they're using this bird to warn them if grandma comes looking for them, because they just want to be playing their games and not working or whatever. So these stories about birds as messengers are in here. Here you have one of the hero twins shooting a bird out of a tree. You can see the little pellet from the blowgun coming right out of it. So this story goes back beyond just the Popol Vuh time into the ancient times, and we have this going all the way back to the beginning of the Maya time, 2,000 years ago. Images that seem to be showing this same story. Can you tell what kind of bird this is? It's really hard to tell because it's wearing a mask and it's doing all kinds of weird stuff there. We'll get back to him in a little bit, but remember how the owl was in the Popol Vuh, the owl is a messenger, and he's sent by the lords of the underworld, send these owls as their messengers. And here you see the god of the underworld with an owl in his headdress, right? So there's an association between the god of the underworld and these owls. And even in modern times, that god of the underworld is still around. So this is an idol called Mashimon. Mashimon lives in Santiago Atitlan in Guatemala. There's priests, there's groups of priests that pass them around from year to year. And when it's your group of priests' turn to watch Mashimon, people come and give you money, and you say prayers to Mashimon to help you with business and travels. So the god of the underworld it's like the god of money and business, and he loves his fine clothes, so he's wearing all these silks. He's got a cigar in his mouth. He loves to smoke, just like he did back in the ancient days. And what he really loves is booze. So you bring some booze and you give it to them, and they pour booze all over this guy, and he's like just soaking wet with booze. And I don't know, so the god of the underworld and his owls are around still. When we went to go visit, we wanted to ask the priests, stories about birds and whatnot, but they weren't interested at all. They wouldn't open up to us. They just wanted money, and so one of my buddies gave them money, and so they start saying a prayer to Mashimon. So they're asking me for my name so they can pray for me, and I'm like, no, I'm good. Pray for my friends. I'm okay on this one. I'm going to sit this one out. So I don't know what he said because it was in Tutuhil Mayan, but I didn't give him my name. But he did pray for my other two friends, which didn't work out very well. That night, my buddy got the worst Montezuma's revenge he'd ever had in all the years of going down there. And I'm like, see, that's what you get. Mashimon, the god of the dead, he did it. You shouldn't play with that stuff, right? It's like, don't go there. So anyway, in the Popol Vuh, there's long lists of different kinds of priests and whatnot, and one of them is called the Ashtukur, which literally means owl master, or he of the owl. Right, and when Christensen, who was the most recent and best translator of this into English, when he got to that, he didn't know what it meant. But from all of our research, I'm pretty convinced that basically the Ashtukur is a kind of sorcerer who can take the shape of an owl or send owls as his emissaries. And so, again, there's this connection like there was with the Lord of the Underworld and these owls. But these sorcerers can put their soul can be an owl, and they can send that out to do their bad things. So that's why you get all kinds of stuff where the owl is if you hear an owl, it means something bad is going to happen. This is a classic Maya vase. Again, here's that god of the underworld with the owl on his headdress, talking to some maidens. This is a beautiful vase that's in the Princeton Museum. If you go to Princeton, they have an art museum. Has anyone been to the Princeton Art Museum? If you ever get over to Jersey and you're going through Princeton, it's free. You can go, and it's beautiful art from all over the world. But you will see this guy hanging out on the head of the god of the underworld, and all the groups that we deal with. And this is something that probably goes back beyond into ancient ancestors of all of us times, this idea of owls being bad. And if you hear an owl, it means someone's going to die. All across North America, South America, you get these stories. All through Europe, same stuff in the folklore. Owls are bad omens. But here they're seen as even more than an omen. They're actually like sorcerers, like that woodpecker. But birds, again, they're not just feathered little animals. They're messengers of the gods. Sometimes they're spirits. Sometimes we'll have groups who'll tell us all about some bird, and we'll try to figure out, like, what bird is it? Well, it's a moot. It's not a bird as we understand it. It's a spirit that flies around at night and makes noises. And so we're always like trying to figure out, is it some kind of owl? But sometimes we're like, no, it's not that kind of a moot. It's like, these are spirit beings that sometimes fly around at night and cause bad things to happen. Or, in this case with the Chorti, they believe that their spirit, Kamut, so there's that moot, is a bird. And so when you die, your bird leaves your body, and the angels of the deceased are either a bird when you're an adult or a butterfly if you're like a kid, right? So there's a connection between your spirit and the birds. That's why those sorcerers, they can have bad birds as their spirit that they can send out to do their bidding, right? Kind of like Walt Disney. Remember in Sleeping Beauty, Maleficent, she sends out the ravens, and it's like to do her evil bidding. Well, that's not, I mean, that goes back into the folklore of, Grimm's fairy tale stuff, but it's they live this. So there's magic, and these birds are a part of it. Now, it can get you killed because it's serious stuff, and if someone really is a sorcerer and they can prove that he's a sorcerer, they'll kill people for this. But it's out there. And it goes back to ancient times where, having power over the birds and over nature is just, it's a big part of, surviving in these environments. Anciently, you would get these rulers, and they would dress up with all of these feathers. I mean, you can see the claws of the bird. In this case, it looks like it's probably some sort of quetzal because it's got the green. This is a reproduction from Copan. But again, this is going back to the ancient. This is like the year 0, right, or the year 1, very early. This is from Izapa on the Pacific coast. This is from Camino in the highlands of Guatemala. And you can see, here's the dude, here's his face. He's got a mask of the god here, but he's got these feathers. The idea is that these guys are dressing up as Itzamna, the grandfather god. And the grandfather god, he does not take the form of an owl like the god of the underworld does. He takes the form of his own bird, and here you can see his bird coming down. And so to be a ruler, you had to emulate the gods, and so you would dress up with all of this on you, and you would do these dances, and you would emulate the birds and the bird of God. And there were other dances and stuff you did, but to be a ruler in early Mayan areas, this was very important for you to do. This is how you legitimized your kingship, as you would dance this dance of the bird god, the bird form of the head god, Itzamna. So for a while, the scholars they were seeing these weird birds, and they're like, what is this? And it would show up, and so they knew it was an important connection to deity, so they called it the principal bird deity. Eventually, they figured out that it's the bird form of Itzamna, In this case, he's got a mask, a God mask on his face. In this case, he's actually got the face of the God. So very hard to understand the symbolism because it's a different style. But that's what you're seeing here. This is the bird form of the main god, Itzamna. Here you have someone that's kind of praying to that bird form here. Here you have a guy holding up. This is actually a crown that's in the shape of the bird god that he's going to put on this king to kind of enthrone him. So this is a very important issue. The God of heaven can take the bird form, and this is what the bird is. And it's very hard to tell what he is, but it goes back very, very ancient. This is from a mural in San Bartolo, and you can see again. So here's his feet. That's the easiest part to see. These are his wings. He's got a big mask that all the gods have on him. And for many years, people thought, well, this must be an eagle, like the harpy eagle, which is the biggest eagle, right, with talons bigger than a tiger, claws. Because, I mean, who else would be, the representative of the main god, but the biggest, baddest bird out there? But really, we've pretty much determined now that it's not an eagle. You can see this this is his beak. He's got this thing. This is a two-headed snake. The bird that represented the main god is our friend the Waco. The one that we started this whole story with, that announced our coming to that little aldea in Guatemala. He is the representative of the main Maya head god. In that Popol Vuh story with the blow dart guy shooting the bird out of the tree, it was this bird. This bird was bringing a message from their grandmother goddess, but they shot him in the face with their blowgun to make him give the message. It was really their grandpa testing them, right? And he wouldn't give them the message until they promised to heal him from being shot in the face. So they took some rubber off of the rubber ball that they used for that Mayan ball game that they would play down there, and they patched up his face with it. That's why he's got black on his face. But this is the bird. This is the bird tying our local Mayan groups. Calls for the rain. It's the God making the rain happen. You can see how all of these pull together and weaving through time and space these stories about how these things work in the natural world. So that's what I have for you guys tonight. We have, looks like, plenty of time for some questions. If you want to write down my email, you can always reach me, and if you have questions later, that's fine. But thanks for letting me come and share like this brief glimpse into these worlds that are very different than maybe what we're used to. So thank you very much.